Ken Trahan with Lenny Van Gilder. It's our First NBC Bank weekend preview brought to you by First NBC Bank with 35 locations throughout metropolitan New Orleans and the surrounding areas. That's First NBC Bank, proud sponsor of SportsNola.com. Well, the enthusiasm surrounding the Saints and their new additions tempered. A little bit of cold water thrown on that with the announcement, or not announcement, but revelation, I should say, that Haoli Kikaha has suffered a torn ACL for the third time, which clearly to me is beyond a yellow flag. It might be a red flag, because when you've torn an ACL twice, fool me once, you won't fool me twice, but three times, this is a career jeopardizer.
I think so, and of course, what you've seen the Saints do, whether it's through free agency, through drafts, you've seen them take some chances. And this was, without the two ACLs, Kikaha was a first-round pick last year. They felt like there was some incredible value in the second round, and some of what we saw last year suggested that, with the 4 sacks, with the forced fumbles that he created. That type of skill set for a pass rusher is something that the Saints haven't seen in a while, and you hope that he would progress in the second year. But obviously, that's gone. If there is, anything good to come out of this, it's that it happened in June, and you've got time to try to, through free agency, through some other means, try to replace him for 2016, as opposed to it happening, say, during the course of, preseason, training camp.
They're going to have to, because that's a thin position. They really addressed the inside with Rankins and Fairley, but the outside, he was really being counted on the opposite side of Cam Jordan. So stay tuned, and we'll see what the Saints are willing to do. Minicamp, of course, next week, since OTAs are over with, and once minicamp is done, then it's done until training camp in West Virginia. So we'll see how that progresses. College baseball, LSU opens play in the Super Regional round Saturday evening, 8 p.m., against a very good Coastal Carolina team. You can read previews by Tony Fortier Benson and Renee Nato on what's to come in that particular series. Bottom line is Coastal's a really good team. This is nothing new for them. They're used to being in this position. They haven't advanced past this round, but they went to Raleigh, rallied in the 9th inning in Game 3, and beat a good North Carolina State team. This is a tough test for LSU.
It is, and you think, okay, this is not a Power 5 league team or anything like that. You don't know about them. Don't let that fool you. This is a team that was probably right on the edge of being a host in terms of a regional. They were probably, if you rank the 2 seeds, they were very high among the 2 seeds. They got sent to NC State, which was probably one of the last ones to get a host. Should have been fairly equal if it were played on a neutral field. It was played at NC State, obviously, and they went in there and basically won 2 out of 3 from NC State. So, that tells you what LSU is up against here. And this is not going to be a cakewalk by any means. That said, LSU is a hot team. Bounce back after the loss to Rice, and then, we're really in trouble on Tuesday in the winner-take-all game. Came back off the deck, and, a lot of local heroes there, none more so than Greg Dykman, who has really been outstanding in the postseason with 4 home runs, 1 in the SEC tournament and 3 in the regional.
So now the question for Paul Maneri is, we know Alex Lang will go in Game 1. Do you pitch Jared Poche in Game 2, or do you give him the extra day's rest in case you need a Game 3?
Yeah, that's an interesting call, and I think obviously what happens in Game 1 may help dictate that. Clearly, like you say, it's Lang in Game 1. And let's see where you are at that point. You win Game 1, who knows? Maybe you try to go with, some combination of Gilbert and Riley Smith and Jake Latz and that type of thing to get you, through Game 2, knowing you've got the game in hand. But do you really want to have it come down to a winner-take-all situation? At that point, do you go for the throat and try to wrap this thing up in 2 games? So, he threw 69 pitches on Tuesday. He threw 92 pitches on Friday before that. Are you asking a lot of him to come back and throw on Sunday night, late Sunday night, in a starting situation? Perhaps, but look, it's it's that time of year, so you do what needs to be done.
Well, the New Orleans Pelicans hiring Danny Ferry, which is an interesting move considering his background and considering the fact that he'd be working under Dell Demps, who quite apparently is going to be here for the upcoming season, even though the Pelicans have not totally addressed that. This is clearly to give Demps help, although some have speculated that Demps better watch his back. Maybe his replacement is now in the office. You say?
Well, not necessarily in the office, because Ferry's going to basically work out of Atlanta and pop into New Orleans once in a while as a consultant. But
you know what I'm saying.
But that said, all indications are this is what Demps wanted. Now, is that necessarily a good thing? Yeah, I think he likes the idea of being able to have an executive level type person to bounce things off of. Obviously, Mickey Loomis is not a basketball guy, and doesn't have that that basketball knowledge that you could say, hey, what if I want to do this, that, or the other? You talk about salary caps and things like that all you want, and even then the football and the basketball rules are much different, especially where it comes to guaranteed versus non-guaranteed deals. But I look, it can't hurt things in the short term. Now, what ends up happening in the long term, who knows?
And then, of course, high school athletics will never look the same again. I don't think there's any going back after what was decided this past week on Wednesday to uphold what had been put in place in January, which is to split in 5 sports overall and create championships galore everywhere. As I wrote, clearly the budgets have to be rewritten for the trophy and plaque people because they're going to have a very good year and many good years to come, it would seem. That said, I don't think this was a good development, and I respect people on both sides, but by and large, all things considered, in particular, the size of the state, the number of schools, and the relationships moving forward, I don't think this was a good move.
No, I see no good to come of this. If you look back at 2013 and what happened then in the football split, if that was kind of a bad fight, if you will, let's put it in family parlance, a bad fight, and then what happened in January was a separation. What we saw on Wednesday was basically a divorce. That was saying, this is it. This thing is never coming back together. You hate to say the word never, but I can't see a scenario at this point that these people can come back under one roof and we see combined championships again. And if the private schools are ever going to make a move, this is when it has to happen. You see the statement yesterday from the bishops of Louisiana, basically giving the Catholic schools of Louisiana, the ability to further explore this thing. And it's got to, that seems like where we're headed. The end result is we're going to have 2 different organizations operating high school sports in Louisiana.
I suspect that will end up being the case, but the only way it does happen is if everybody is together and in unison on the private school side. And I shouldn't even use the word private, because my guess is they're going to be able to attract some schools from the public school sector to their side because of the ability to make money, because of the competition, and because of the fact that they're like institutions in the sense that they're open enrollment schools, which is the dirty little secret that exists right now, because there's barely 70 private schools in the state, but there's at least 120 open enrollment schools who qualify, quite frankly, as select schools, who, by the way, don't compete as select schools.
It's all going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Just how many of does it have to take 100% jumping over? I don't know that it does, but what's going to be interesting to see, let's say it's 90%. Okay? About those other schools, what are you going to do with them? Say, oh, wait, now we're going to let you back into the rest of the championships? Or are they going to sit there and basically say, oh, you're a de facto champion because you're the only select school in Class X?
Right. They've got to do it.
Yeah. So, who knows? Maybe doing this forces the hand to bring this back together. Maybe it's the step that needs to be taken to help resolve things. Because look, like you and I have said before, you be careful what you wish for in this situation. You want to break this thing apart, and split these championships, that's fine. But when these other schools go and form another association of some kind, or whatever it's going to be called, you stand to lose a lot. Whether it's sponsorship dollars, those fees that those schools pay annually to support the LHSA, whatever the case may be, that money is out of the pot.
You might as well split in every sport, because it's basically where we're at, and the preponderance of private schools now are not going to play the public schools in any sport if they can avoid doing so that voted for the split. You've already seen it. It's only going to continue to happen. Relationships, some of which were strained previously, are now broken. Relationships which were good previously are now not good as a result. That's the end result of this.
Yeah, and the other thing I would add to that is this. You've got, in some school systems out there, some schools that voted for a split, some schools that voted against the split. If I'm a private school out there and one school voted against it, I'm not playing any school in that league. I don't want to say it's like, who's to say how that money is being split up within a school district? So I would not play any of them. And I will go so far as to say this as well. If I'm a private school and I'm playing games at a facility that's run by a public school, I'm looking for another place to play my games. And there's a certain number of schools in our area that would impact, and we know who they are, but that is one person's opinion, because, again, you're putting money in the pockets of the public school system by doing that. And if you're saying we're getting away from it, then it needs to be a total split.
Easier said than done. The problem is stadium availability. So I just don't see that that's going to be possible for the people that we're referencing, and we know who they are. So goes without saying. In Orleans Parish, you have schools, that public and private, that play at public facilities. In Jefferson Parish, they play at public school facilities, by and large. So we know who we're talking about, and that goes beyond Jefferson Parish, but that's just a good example. Stay tuned. It's a mess. It's going to get messier, and that's simply what's been wrought, regardless of how you fall. And as I've said before, and I will say again, I genuinely respect all positions on this and understand that people feel like they have to do what's best for their school, their district, their parish, whatever the case may be. But the system is broken, and I think it's only going to get worse before it gets better. And the only way it gets better, I think, is with a split association.
I see it that way, and I just think it sends a bad message personally in terms of, basically we can't play by the same rules that you're playing by, so we want to be able to compete for our own championships, and we're going to take our ball and go somewhere else.
Here's the problem, and I know we're belaboring this, but I'll stop on this. The problem is that one side was clearly trying to find solutions, coming up with all kinds of ideas and proposals, and the other side wasn't willing to listen in any way, shape, or form. That's genuinely true. I mean, you have to say that based upon what you've seen, because the whole concept was show up to vote so we can stop this and put number 5 on there, none of the above, but you have to show up to do it, and they all showed up en masse, and that's why it ended up that way. So, again, it's a spirit of cooperation. Are people willing to sit down and listen and find solutions? I don't think the solutions are very difficult, and I've spelled them out several times, because it's always about following the money. It always has been. It always will be. It's not recruiting. It's the money. You can recruit all you want, but at the end of the day, if someone from a poor background wants to send their child to a private school and they can't afford it, they're not going there. It's that simple. So the answer is very simply money, financial aid, and putting a cap on the percentage that you can provide as a school. If you do that and you open enrollment for public schools to level the playing field for public schools, I think you got two very basic solutions that aren't very difficult to implement or to trace or to enforce.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next executive director of the LHSA, Ken Trahan.
It's not happening. Thank you, Lenny. Have a great weekend.
We'll see you Monday.
That's our First NBC Bank Weekend Preview, brought to you by First NBC Bank, with 35 locations throughout Southeast Louisiana, into the Florida Panhandle, and growing. That's First NBC Bank, proud sponsor of SportsNola.com. He's Lenny. I'm Kenny. Have a great weekend, and God bless you.